So in Romans 3:23, Paul said that all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. In Jeremiah, I don't remember exactly where, I'm not referencing it, but it says that the heart is always wicked, perpetually evil. So Jesus had to come as God in the flesh to save us from sin, in order to reunite us to him, for us to actually have the life that we were meant to have, which is an eternal life with him. But sin drove us apart from him, so he had to reconcile us to him by coming in the flesh and dying and ministering to us about the kingdom of heaven so that we could be reunited to him. So what is sin and why is it so bad? We're going to get into that after we run the intro. Like, share, subscribe, comment, all of that stuff. Let's get into it. Okay, so first we'll start with words out of Jesus' own mouth. Matthew 22:37 through 40, Jesus said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind." So if we put these three things together, it would be all of your being, right? All of who you are, your heart, soul, and mind. This is all of who you truly are deep down, right? Your entire being. You're supposed to love God with all of your being. And this is the first great commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. So what he's telling us is all of the Old Testament, all of it hung on these two main commandments. Love God with all of your being, and then love your neighbor as yourself. So love people, right? You're a person and your neighbor is a person. So we're supposed to, Jesus commanded us ultimately to love God with all of our being and to love people. So when we love God, he gives us his love, right? Because we sing praise to him, he sings praise back to us. So we understand what true love is, and then we're able to perpetuate that out in the world, right? So when we don't do these, when we're not loving God with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength, with all of our entire being, we're in sin. And Paul tells us this in Romans 14:23. All of Romans 14 goes through sin and the commandments, but Romans 14:23 says, "But he who doubts is condemned if he eats, because he does not eat from faith." And then this is the key at the end. "For whatever is not from faith is sin." So anything that you do, it doesn't matter what it is, as Paul said, even eating, just the simple act of eating, which everybody does multiple times a day, as a general rule, unless you're fasting or without or something like that. As a general rule, we all eat, and we all eat multiple times a day. So that's the example that Paul is using when he says, whatever is not from faith is sin. Even if you're not eating your meal in faith, then you're sinning, right? So this is sin, not having faith in God, putting your trust in God to provide for you, to do anything and everything that you absolutely need. Anytime that you're not in that kind of faith, anytime you're not walking in faith with God, you are in sin. The other that we have is from James, Jesus' brother. Therefore, to him, James 4:17 says, "Therefore to him who knows to do good and does not do it, to him it is sin." So this is what we refer to a lot of times as the sin of omission, right? Whenever you know what you're supposed to do and don't do it, that is sin. Now also, we can take that inversely as well. So if we take that inversely, the inverse of that is, therefore to him who knows to not do evil and does do it, to him it is sin. So both of those things are sin. If you know what to do and you don't do it, then you're in sin, because that's the sin of omission. That's God saying, hey, do this, and you not doing it. That's a direct disobedience, which is sin. Then the inverse, if you know not to do evil and you do it, then that's sin. That one's kind of obvious to us. But what James is doing is taking that obvious one, taking the obvious. If you know what is evil and you do it, then that's sin. That's, oops, sorry, I'm bumping the mic here. That's easy for us, right? That's a more easy concept. But the inverse, James really highlights this and takes it to the next level by using the inverse, right? We all know if you do evil, and then if you know what's evil and you do it, then that's sin. But he's flipping it in the inverse and saying, if you know what is good and you don't do it, then that's also sin. So whenever we're not in absolute faith with God, whenever we're not fully trusting in him, loving him, putting our faith in him, we're in sin. Whenever we know what to do and don't do it, we're in sin. Whenever we know what not to do and still do it anyway, we're in sin. That's how we are all sinners, because we've all done these things. We've all done something we know we are not supposed to do, that we know is bad. We have all not done the things that we know that we're supposed to do. And we have all had moments where we didn't love God with all of our being, or we didn't love his people. So that's kind of what is sin. One other one I'd really like to add in here that I didn't think about until just now, if you'll bear with me, is Galatians 5:19 through 26, I believe it is. Galatians 5:19 through 26. Paul also gives us kind of a rundown here of what the works of the flesh are, which is sin. Now, the works of the flesh are evident, which are adultery. Adultery is pretty simple, cheating on a loved one, or that's kind of the basic that we think about. But adultery, at its fundamental level, is taking faith and putting it in somebody else or something else, right? So we can commit adultery to God by not being faithful to God, right? It's not being faithful is what adultery truly, fundamentally is. So if you're not putting your faith in God and you're breaking that trust that God has put in you, or you're breaking the trust that other people have put in you, then you're committing adultery, right? Fornication, so that's having intimate relations, obviously most of the time we think of sex with this, but we can commit fornication in other ways, like, you can have intimate relations with somebody without actually fully having sex, right? So fornication isn't just sex, it's having intimate relations with somebody outside of a wedded environment, where you are wedded to that person, committed in a full life commitment. Uncleanness, that's kind of that's kind of we're not going to go into that. Lewdness, that's somebody that always has to say something gross or something, use cuss words all the time, or do things that they know are not clean or not proper behavior, right? Like dressing very scantily, that's lewdness, or walking down the street yelling profanities, that's lewdness. Idolatry, that one is pretty straightforward, putting anything before or anybody before God in your worship of God. Sorcery, that's practicing magic, which, if you want to laugh at it or not, there really are people out there who practice magic, who get results, and who love it, and who commit their lives to it, and it's not of God. Hatred. Hating anybody is always sin, because we're not to hate, we're to love. God doesn't even want us hating anybody, right? He tells us to love everybody. Contentions. It's being contentious, like wanting to fight, wanting to compete with people all the time, and letting those feelings get between you and another person. Jealousies. being envious of others, what others have. Outbursts of wrath, that's anger. That's yelling at your children, yelling at your loved ones just because you're angry in that moment, having an outburst of wrath, of anger, right? Selfish ambitions, that's self-centeredness, right? Ultimately, sin always boils down to a self-centeredness, but you're focused more on yourself than you are on God and other people, right? It boils down to that. Self-ambitions is you, like, I could have the selfish ambition to want to watch this YouTube video, but my child keeps interrupting me, keeps messing with me when I'm trying to watch this YouTube video. I'm in my flesh when I get upset that my child is distracting me from this YouTube video that I want to watch, right? Unless it's like a YouTube video about saving the child's life in that moment. It's a selfish ambition to want to watch this YouTube video instead of spending time with the child, right? So that's kind of that's a selfish ambitions. We kind of tend to think of that in like a career-oriented way, but a selfish ambition can be something so, it seems so menial throughout the day kind of thing that you don't even think about it kind of thing. Dissensions, that's, arguments and strife between people that doesn't get resolved, that nobody resolves. Heresies, that's, twisting God's words and God's intentions. Envy, which is jealousy again, but jealousy is more to do with romance, with love. I'm jealous of the girl that guy is with, or the guy that girl's with. Envy is more, man, I really wish I had that car that Joe has. Joe doesn't deserve that car, I do. Murders, pretty straightforward. That's intentional killing of someone. Obviously, there's nuance to that. So, if you're defending yourself or your family and you accidentally kill somebody in the process, then of course, that's not a murder. Murder is more premeditated, more you have an option not to, but you still do it anyway. Revelries, or drunkenness and revelries. Drunkenness, being given over to alcohol, having to drink alcohol to function. Revelries, those are constant parties, like tonight we eat, for tomorrow we die, not giving any I guess not giving any kind of concern to the life and how serious it is, and the severity of our actions and our beliefs and the things that we think and do and say and feel and project out into reality. Revelries really gets in that, because of revelries is that giving over of the care. It's just throwing care to the wind and just being, partying all the time and always wanting to be fun and please yourself and the like. So that's kind of a good breakdown right there too of what sin really kind of presents itself as when it fully kind of comes together, when it conceives, right, and is birthed into death, as the Bible puts it, as God himself puts it, when it's conceived, brought forth, and then brings death. That's what sin ultimately turns into, is all these works of the flesh. But anyway, so that's what sin is. That's why sin is so severe, because God is pure. He's pure good, pure love. So he can't have anything to do with any of this stuff. If any of this stuff is near him, it's instantly judged. That's why we don't see God's face. It's a courtesy, because the moment you see God's face, you're going to be judged, because you're going to see what is purely good, and you're going to know that nothing that's not purely good can be in the presence of that. Instantly it's condemned, it's cast away from him, because he will have nothing to do with anything that's not purely good, purely love, purely truth, purely merciful, pure goodness. And so that's why only he could reconcile us back to him. We could never reconcile ourselves back to him. He had to send his son to die for us, to take the punishment that we deserved of being cast away from him forever, in order to reconcile us back to him. But of course, we're free-thinking, free will agents, and he can't save all of us, because not all of us want to be saved. But until next time, this has been Sin, What is Sin, and If you like, please like. If you dislike, please dislike. If you have something to say, comment, hit me up on one of my social medias. I always put them in the description. Definitely share, or like I say, let's discuss it if you even want to get on and discuss it. But until next time, I love you, and we'll see you later.